My name is Réti. I was born in Budapest, Hungary in 1942. I was 2.5 years old at the time of liberation. I tell my mother's story, which is my story as well, because I was there with her. We survived the Budapest Ghetto by sheer luck, grit, determination, and love. My parents got married in 1939, and at the time the custom was that if you got engaged, you put the wedding band on your right hand, and when you got married, you moved it from your right hand to your left hand, symbolizing that you are now married. This ring was very special to my parents, but especially to my mother. When we were taken out of our home, and we were forced to hand over everything that was of value, my mother decided to hide that wedding ring in the baby's diaper. So it is said that if you touch poo-poo, caca, it brings you luck. And this ring had indeed brought my share of good luck. I am wearing that ring of love. In 1944, when Hungary was invaded by the Nazis, although Hungary was an ally of Germany, they forced the Jewish population of military age to join the Hungarian army. However, my father and grandfather, who were made to join, were not allowed to wear uniforms. And basically, my mother and grandmother were alone at home. At the time we were taken out of our home at the end of a gun, we were given 5 minutes to pack up and carry with us only what we could carry. And we had no idea what's happening next. We had no idea if we're going to live another hour, another day, or another week. So life was hanging in the balance at all times. It was stressful, it was strange, it was totally unexperienced until then. It was a brand new experience. My mother was together with my grandmother. The three of us were in the ghetto together with some friends, and because originally the food that we were able to take in with us lasted long enough until the day of liberation. Interestingly enough, on December 25, my grandfather was able to escape his forced labor battalion, and he found the right ghetto, which was a phenomenal accomplishment because there were many ghettos in Budapest. And this was great relief for us. But unfortunately, the problem was there was one more mouth to feed. And on the day of liberation, in fact, my grandfather fainted from hunger. One more day, and none of us would have survived. It was a community. We were helping each other. We relied on each other. It was really a small commune. I mean, 27 people in a two-room apartment, actually smaller than where we are right now. So it was a very, very trying and difficult condition. My personal recollection has to do with the crowded conditions in the ghetto, because my mother was together with her best friend, who had a baby just a little bit older than myself, and the two mothers were able to commandeer a fold-out Chesterfield and had the two babies sleeping between them, touching their feet to each other. And I remember that my old friend Katie had the coldest feet in the universe. Again, this is memories that are passed on to me from my mother and grandmother of hunger. Originally, we were able to take staples with us, but when the gates of the ghetto were shut, nobody in or out, those supplies diminished. Towards the end, we had less and less and less food. So my other memory is the first piece of food I received from a liberating Russian or Soviet soldier. A mother's love is so different from any other love. That is something that I don't think any man truly understands. My mother was a very young woman deprived of a normal family surrounding. She was thrown into this nightmare that she was totally unfamiliar with. Her concentration was to give her child, me, as much as possible. So, being confined to a two-room apartment with other people was a very, very troubling situation, but because of her devotion to me, that is what kept her going. That is what she was concentrating on, to protect me and give me as much love and nourishment as possible. My mother was an extraordinary woman, and she had a couple of incredible foresights. And one of them was she packed a little blanket, some extra food, a thermos of tea. But the most extraordinary thing she did was ask my grandmother to follow us no matter what happens. She had no idea what's going to happen, but this is a precaution that paid dividends, because at one time when we were rounded up and taken to the infield of a open-air racetrack, an order was given for all mothers to put down their babies who were younger than age 3 and walk away from the baby. When that happened, my grandmother, who followed us, was able to pick me up and carry me away. But right then and there were some babies who were actually trampled to death. So the horror started very well immediately. And the extraordinary occurrences also started immediately. My grandmother recognized a young policeman from her hometown, and she asked him for help. And this young policeman said, "You see that group over there? Make sure you don't get mixed up with them, because they'll be taken to Auschwitz." And by that time, we knew what Auschwitz was. At that time, we had no idea where we're going to be taken. The idea was for the young women who were able-bodied to be perhaps taken to a work battalion, or perhaps taken to Auschwitz. The Hungarian Nazis, collaborating with the German Nazis, were told what to do, and the fact that a lot of the Hungarian Jews living in Budapest were saved was a miracle by itself. My mother, for the longest time, was convinced that Raoul Wallenberg, who interceded on behalf of the Hungarian Jews, was one of our saviors. My grandmother attributes our survival to the courage of the young policemen who told us not to get mixed up with the group. They were chaotic, horrific conditions, and there was no right or wrong. There was no time to think it through. Sometimes you act and you react. And if you go to the left, as it was in Auschwitz, it meant life. If you went to the right, it meant the gas chamber. So you don't know give me extra food, read stories, keep me occupied, because, as I said, we were literally starving to death, and that was something that she made sure, because she begged a Russian soldier who liberated us to give us some food, because she said, my baby is starving to death. Once we were in a ghetto, we were all in the same situation. Everybody in the ghetto were Jews who happened to be incarcerated, and there was no outside influence that could make our lives different. The time that we were helped was before we were taken to the ghetto, and immediately after liberation, the janitor of the building where we lived, a very kind soul, brought us extra food, brought my bicycle back to me. So we were helped by strangers. Yes, not everybody was an anti-Semite. Not everybody was harboring hatred. There were a lot of people of goodwill. My mother, it was one of the most difficult thing in her life, the most difficult challenge in her life, when she found out that her husband was never going to return because he was murdered. So she was a young widow with a young child who had to live together with her in-laws. And it was not an easy life. I didn't really become conscious of it until I started to tell my story and explain that indeed what an extraordinary woman she was. We just went on with our lives. My mother was a seamstress. My grandfather was a swimming instructor. My grandmother was a kitchen worker. Our life just went on. And I went to school. I had a relatively good life. I was part of the school soccer team. I was member of the chess club. I was member of the airplane club. I had a busy life. I have been saying for a long time that every Holocaust survivor story is a love story. Love of life, love of family, love of freedom. And when I talk to younger audiences, I pose the question, why do we hate? And it's not an easy answer. Then I will say, why do we love? That's an easy answer, because we learned it from our family. I don't think I'll ever get the true answer to that. But when I wrote the sequel to my mother's book, and I wrote down how I grew up, what my thoughts were, and I gave it to my mother, she says, now I understand why you did all those crazy things that you did. There's no question that the Holocaust shaped my life, but I wasn't conscious of it. I wasn't really part of every day that I do this because, or I don't do this because. It just shaped me, who I am. I became an industry spokesman in Toronto's taxi industry. I became a speaker at the Holocaust Museum, at the Wiesenthal Center, at the Israeli Foundation. I became a volunteer swimming instructor. I was the longest serving instructor at the Jewish Community Center for 30 years. These were things that were in the background of my genetic and maternal upbringing. Interestingly enough, never again, unfortunately, has lost some of its original intent. Today, after October 8, we're experiencing an incredible rise of anti-Semitism and xenophobia. It's almost like never again is now here again. But I am doing my best to make sure that the message of never again will carry on. And for me, the never again is that you cannot live with hatred in your heart all the time. Hatred is something that you are not born with. Hatred is something that you learn. So for the future generation, my message is, don't hate. You don't have to love everybody, but understand that just because people don't agree with you doesn't mean that they are worse or better or, heaven forbid, are subject to be murdered because your hatred overtakes your rational thinking. The Holocaust was the greatest tragedy in humanity. It is part of human nature not to live in peace. It is part of human nature to rise up against existing conditions, which is fine. You can change things. But the moment you become a murderer because your hatred is so deep and your rational is so clouded with lack of judgment, that is when we are going to have problems. Today, and this is June 30th, 2025, tomorrow is Canada's birthday, and Canada is a wonderful country promoting peace and harmony. For me to live in Canada, which is one of the greatest countries, surrounded by tolerance and understanding, is important. And that is why I'm hoping that the future generation will not give in to the hate mongers, to the distortionists, and to the people who will not tolerate others. Canada indeed is blessed with a lot of good people, both newcomers and those who were born here and lived here for generations. I'm very proud to be a Canadian. At times I am angry, at times I am wondering why. Why? Where does all this hatred come from? But at other times I remember I've been a Holocaust educator for 25 years. I address one classroom at a time. If out of that classroom I only succeed with convincing one person not to hate, then my father's, my mother's, and my grandmother's legacy is carried on. So for me, this is a personal mission. It's a personal commitment to eradicate hatred and prejudice. God gave us a choice. Every one of us has the choice to do good or to do evil. Choose good. Choose love over hate. But I am sure that she is looking down on all of us, including her grandchildren, and she is pleased with the fact that I, her son, was able to take revenge on the Nazis because I became a grandfather.